right, welcome to your next session. My name is Ted Normanson. I'm from the Canadian Centre for Cyber Security and also the program chair for next year's meeting. I'd like to remind you that the TLP for this is, okay, well the sign says TLP white. Those of you who were in my presentation 2 days ago would know that's now TLP clear. There'll be a question and answer period at the end. We'll have about at least 5 minutes for it. There are going to be microphones here at the front as well as one at the back. Don't forget to fill in your surveys, and if you have your devices silenced, that would be appreciated. Without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Kenneth Grossman. He's here from the National Institute of Health to talk to you about creating an information security, information assurance program lessons learned. Kenneth?
Good morning. How y'all doing? All right, so I've been in U.S. federal government for about 25 years plus now, doing information security with a little programming before that. So everything I say is based on in that lens. So please bear with me on that. So why do I think I'm capable of talking about this? Because in 3 of the organizations I have, 2 of them I built the information security from the ground up. And one of the more important ones I found is my previous job where I was part of the Federal Computer Incident Response Capability, then we renamed it Center, and then became the US CERT. And I helped shepherd it from the FedCert into the US CERT, which is now grown into CISA, which is a much needed group. All right, so everyone talks about your organization's mission, and there have been some talks this week where they mentioned mission very specifically. So you really do need to understand what your organization mission is. You need to be able to figure out if you're public, government, irregardless of what country you belong to, if you're private industry, and if you're private industry, are you in just one country, in a few countries? Are you totally global, international? Are you in healthcare? Are you academic research? Like NIH, yes, we're government, but we're also academic healthcare researchers. So we get hit with a lot of different issues that are from all 3 areas, not just one area. And one of the things you really need to know is how does your information security or your information assurance program play in fulfilling the mission of your organization? Because that's the mindset you have to think about. You need to be an enabler for the mission. You need to sell yourself as an enabler for the mission. Because most people just think, oh, the security, they get in the way. They won't let me do what I want to do. So you need to be, that's one thing you really need to focus on, is how you sell yourself as enabling the mission of your organization. And to do that, you have to understand the scope of your mission. Like, I'm at NIAID, which is just one of 27 institutes within the National Institutes of Health. And NIH is just one of 5 or 6 operational directives within the Department of Health and Human Services. So understanding where I lie in was very informative in helping how I developed the program. So because I needed to know where my responsibilities were and where NIH's responsibilities, where the responsibilities of some of my fellow institutes were. So that was it. And so, like, are you with your organization? Are you just with one division or one small part of your organization? Or are you even a really small part of the group, of the organization? So you just need to know where your jurisdiction resides so that you can actually work with everyone else. Then there's always a back and forth about the makeup of the team. Is it a formal team? Is it a virtual team? Or in a lot of cases, what it tends to be is a combination of both. And that was the same with pre-pandemic. Even though now in the pandemic, everyone's virtual just by where they're located and doing their work. But when you're talking about formal, it's like, do you have a set group of people that are doing the work? Or do you bring people in as required? And a lot of times things will change over the years as you mature your operations. All right, so I try to make this not so much a reading list. So there's some core functions that you need to have within your team. It may not be individuals doing these functions, but it could be one or two individuals doing most of them. Some of them are like vulnerability configuration management. That may not even be part of the information security program. That could be part of your computer management program, which is could be a different part. Like your digital forensic incident response, your privacy. Like at NIH, privacy is a totally separate office, but we deal with it in multiple fashions, with the security auditing aspect as well as handling privacy and incidents. So that's part of why I threw it in. Then you have ad hoc, as required, is like legal, which I also loop in law enforcement, because you need to have them involved, as several other speakers talked about. Human resources, because you may want to you have an incident and you need to handle a client, or you need to handle an employee a certain way, but you need to make sure you do it in the legal way. So that's where you have the human resources involved. And then there's always going to need to be some kind of communications. You need to manage communications either internally to your CIO office or internally to your organization, and then, God forbid, if you really have to talk to the media, you want to be able to have one voice who's able to talk about it, and that's usually your public relations or your communications department. And then, as you're developing your team, you need to think about who are your customers, and your customers can just be your OCIO shop, or they can be just your small organization as a whole. Or maybe you have external cooperative agreements with other organizations. They could be your customers as well, based on the relationship of it. And like contractors, I know with the U.S. government, we throw in contracting clauses that mandate certain things from an information security standard. So in that case, those contractors are your customers as well. And then figure out like what other organizations you have. Like FIRST is a great example of an organization. In the U.S., we have all the different ISACs, where healthcare ISAC, financial, banking, real estate ISAC. There's the multi-state ISAC. And when USCERT was first set up, there was trying to figure out where we're going to be the federal ISAC. So those are some of the things you need to talk about. Now, we all don't want to be worried about politics, but the fact of the matter is, organizational politics always takes the place, because you always know that there's somebody who has the voice of the CEO or the director of your organization or someone else. It could be the CEO's secretary, or it could be one in my organization, we have all these VIP associate directors for different labs. And those are the cases where it's like we need to be aware of how what we do affects their labs. Because if they don't like it, then they complain to my boss. And when my boss comes to me and says, so-and-so is not happy with you, it's not a good thing. So you need to know. You need to be able to get those folks on your side, work with them. And like I said, some organizations, it could be the smallest lab, or the smallest division in your company. But if they're the ones that bring in most of the money, you think they're going to have a lot of clout. So you need to understand who there are those relationships, so that you can make sure that you deal with understanding folks and prioritizing what you need to do in a way that you fulfill your mission. So, regulatory compliance requirements, we all have them. And this is just a list of ones that I know about or someone gave me a link to try to help me make this a little bit more broader. Like, unfortunately, when I was reviewing my healthcare information security and privacy practitioner handbook, I could only really find the 3 U.S. codes. And I'm sure, I know EU has codes, and I'm not sure about some of the other requirements. So you think about that. Financial, like Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a U.S. code, and then the payment card standards, which is international. Those are issues you need to do. Every country has some kind of privacy data, whether it be, like in the U.S., the Privacy Act of 1974, and there's an electronic one, 1993, I think, is the year for that one, or EU's General Data Protection Regulation. Those are, you need to know what privacy requirements you have in your country, or your countries if you work in multiple ones. Then, like the U.S. government, we have FISMA, as we call it, the Modernization Act of 2014, which was good for helping put CISA in as a high level. Or recently I learned about, and this is some of their directives for the EU, the NISD and the Cyber Security Act. And if you haven't had a chance to go down to Nissa's booth, I would recommend you do, so you can talk to them. Because even though you may not be required to follow them, it's a good idea to learn what other things are, so it can help you with your development of your programs, even if you don't need to comply with them. So, what are your dependencies? Like my tier 1 incident responders, they're the customer support technicians, the guys that go in to help the people with updating their Microsoft Office if they have other issues with their workstations. And they don't not only help us with handling our information security incidents. When we have vulnerabilities on desktops and laptops that we can't fix through a global push, they're the ones that go and fix those desktops and laptops. So they're a very big thing. It's like if you have to work with your server team, because a lot of times they're the ones that deal with managing the vulnerabilities on your servers or making sure that your server's logs are going there. In my organization, we have a cyber security engineering team, which handles all our SIM, our routers, our firewalls, our anti-malware applications. So those are dependencies I have. Have you contracted out to an MSSP to do some of your work? That's a dependency. Do you have to bring in another company in to do your forensics because you don't have that in-house capability? And at NIH, most of the institutes aren't large enough that they can afford to do it. So they have to hope for NIH's Information Security Program to do the digital forensics for them. I luckily was enough and had to support my boss that I was able to bring that capability in-house so that I didn't have to depend on them. And then it's like, are there other parts of your organization that you rely on that you don't manage? Those are dependencies, and you need to know that. You need to know who you're responsible for. Yeah. So we all know it's like, most of us know the incident response is reactive. But I always like to think of how can I be proactive first? Security audits. Yes, they are a pain. They take time. The people that you have to deal with say, why are you bothering with me? They are a snapshot. The way they used to be done, they are a snapshot in time. But what it is if you know how your systems are, how they're set up, how they're managed, do they have an incident response plan for that particular system? Do you have a configuration management plan for that system? Do you have a disaster recovery plan for that system? Then in worst case scenarios, you know you are ready. And the way things are being, at least within the US government and the National Institutes for Standards and Technologies, they are making things where it's not so much that timestamp. We're looking at doing these ongoing authorizations where it's like, yes, you do your reviews of these controls at this one standpoint, and then you do a third of them every year. But it's also part of you looking at how the system's being configured and managed over time. You manage it? Are they fixing your vulnerabilities in a timely manner? Are they making changes and updating their documentation in a timely manner? Those are things that help us out. Vulnerability and configuration management. Yeah, those are very much, if you can stop things from being unsecure, then at the get-go, then you don't have to do it. Let's say in the US we have CISA 2201, where they are constantly giving us every couple of days a new list of vulnerabilities that we need to fix. Yes, it takes up a lot of time, but it keeps us on our toes and tries to make sure that at least our public-facing systems are as secure as possible. Penetration testing. To me, that's just a bonus. That means you get someone else to look at you and see where you may have issues with your systems, and so that you can fix them before the bad guys get to them. They are time-consuming. It can be expensive if you do it right, but they are very helpful. Then threat intelligence. There's been several sessions on threat intelligence. From the proactive side, threat intelligence is, okay, I am in these various sectors. So who is looking at these sectors for whatever reason? Is it for financial gain? Is it for espionage? Is it for hacktivism? So the threat intelligence folks can help you with that and make sure that you have an idea of who you might be targeting you. Now, on the reactive side, okay, again, let's start, since I just talked about threat intelligence on the proactive side, let's talk about it on the reactive side. We all know threat intelligence, threat hunting. You go in and look to see, okay, we had this incident. Let's do a little bit more detailed look at what happened and see if we missed anything. Or maybe you're just, you have somebody looking at the logs, and your threat intelligence guy will take it and just start going through a whole deep dive where your standard network security folks don't have that time. So you look, so they can look at see what's happened in the past to try to protect you and help prevent things from the beginning. Then network security. All right. You see, you're looking at your logs. You see something anomalous. Is it an event? Yes. Is it an incident? Well, let's go look and see. It's an event? Okay. I got to respond to it. So now I have incident response. And you're handling it. And as part of the incident response, it's like, oh, okay, I need to see what happened on that machine. So now I have my digital forensics folks come in and do the deep dive. I'm looking at a machine or whatever to see what really happened. So I would love to stay away from reactive and try to stay more on the proactive side. But at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to protect everything or prevent everything. So we're always going to have some form of reactive. And the better you are at being reactive and capturing things in a shorter amount of time, then the least damage can be done to your system. So before I go into questions, I'm just going to flap up my contact information. All right. So do we have any questions? All right. Jeff?
Thanks, Ken. I was wondering if you're able to, obviously you work in an organization that has been very important over the past couple of years. So I was interested if you're able to comment on some of the different challenges that you faced being an information security person in a government health organization during a pandemic. I'm sure that presented some special challenges. If you have anything to share, I think people would be interested in hearing.
Well, I guess one of the key things is for those who are non-American citizens, Dr. Anthony Fauci is the head of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases. And during our previous president's reign, he was quite vocal in downplaying what the president was saying and telling the truth, the unvarnished truth. So that made him a lot of enemies in the president's coterie and his cult-like following. And this is my personal opinion, so please don't say it's anything government. So when we first learned about some of the harassment that Dr. Fauci and his family were receiving, we had to figure out what can we do to assist them. Well, my immediate gut reaction was we need to get the Inspector General involved, the HHS Inspector General, and Inspector Generals in the U.S. government have multiple jobs. Some of them are the overall auditors of the system, but they are also the police force for the government. They'll come in and handle things, and then bring in the Secret Service or bring in the FBI if necessary. So that was some of the stuff, and then some of the other stuff is like one thing that President Trump did do correctly is establish Operation Warp Speed, which is made it monetarily feasible for the drug companies to work to develop the vaccine in a more quick manner than it is make it worthwhile for them to, before they got approval from the FDA to start developing and manufacturing the vaccine. So we had multiple applications out there which were to provide people with access to information for how to treat people with COVID or how to enroll into vaccine trials. So I had to make sure that those systems were secure and as best as possible. And then other than just making sure that our financial systems that doled out grants and contracts to companies that were doing research on COVID, and as well as some of the other stuff like Ebola and Hanta and all that. Those were just some of the other issues.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask you a question. You've been around some time and you've seen the progress of things and you've seen how such teams develop, and maybe you can anticipate a little bit of the future. I wanted to ask something in particular with the use of legal services. And I'm part of an organization where we see that the legal office is not a remote thing that only comes in when we have to deal with law enforcement, but they're getting more and more involved into daily operations. We often find ourselves in situations where we need to decide about security risk by resorting to legal reasoning, and they become part of the team more and more. So I just wanted to ask whether you have a view of whether legal, instead of an ad hoc thing, may become part of the core operations, let's say. Maybe not the core, but being at least...
There's an answer to that that people don't like, and that's it depends. And I haven't had to do...
very, very legal.
Yeah, I haven't had to do where legal is really involved much, except for when I'm reviewing contracts prior to them. Prior to the solicitations going out to ensure that we have the FISMA clauses put into those contracts. But I look at it as like having setting up a relationship with your counsel, your general counsel, and with, like in my case, I have good relationships with the IG because they've come to me for my assistance on issues, and I've had to go to them when we accidentally discover something that's like, I think this is questionable, so I throw it to them to look at and say, is this did this person actually create a crime, or is he just abusing government equipment? So I'm sorry I can't give you a direct answer, but I would say it really depends on how your organization's set up, and it may fit your organization to have legal fully embedded as a dashed line in your system so that they're involved in everything.
Do we have any more questions? Still have 5 minutes. Well, see none. Ken, thanks very much. A round of applause, please, for Ken and his excellent presentation. And I would remind everyone, fill in your surveys, please. And you've got a little bit extra for a break for the next session. We'll be starting at 11:40.